Hello, welcome back to my channel. In this week's video, I wanted to give you a glimpse of what confirmation was like for me. As I mentioned before, this is basically the biggest first milestone of the PhD, and passing this step basically means that you become a PhD candidate and are allowed to continue with the program. It basically started like any other day. I got ready, I practiced my presentation a few times, and then I got packed to go to uni. And my confirmation is at 3 p.m, so I still had heaps of time. And most of this is spent casually looking over everything I've done the past year, just so I'm ready for questions. And then it was time to head to the meeting, which was just conveniently down the corridor. And at one point I had to leave the room whilst my committee talked about my progress. So here I am, just trying to wait out with a lot of nervous energy. And after about 20 minutes, I was called back in and that was done. So yeah, I just wanted to debrief as well as give you a bit of a breakdown of what generally happens in these types of meetings in case it's somewhat interesting to you. So yeah, this meeting is with my entire academic committee. Basically, this is just made up of my two supervisors or advisors if you're in the US, but also a chair and a super chair. I may have talked about this briefly in one of my earlier vlogs, but basically what a chair does is it's an academic that's not really from your field. They're still in psychology, but they're not working on personality or meditation or well-being related topics, which is like my area of research. So they're able to give a more of a unbiased view of how my PhD is going. And it's also good because if I have any issues with my supervisors, then the idea is that you can go to your chair for help. They don't have any conflict of interest, like they probably don't work with the supervisors if they're not in the same area. And a super chair is basically someone who's like an extra chair that gets assigned to you sometimes. They pretty much have the same role as a chair, I guess, but it's just an extra person. Yeah, to be honest, I'm not entirely sure why a super chair is necessary. Apparently it's just like an extra sort of overseeing the process type of person, but I do think that Melbourne Uni has now gotten rid of them, so might have been like, well, talking to some people, I think I was one of the last people to get one. So yeah, the meeting at my uni anyway follows pretty much the same process for everybody. So yeah, first the chair just confirms that all of the required forms have been submitted. Basically, you have to fill out a confirmation form, and that's where you can like document if you need any leave, if you have like a funding request, as well as attaching evidence that you've done like the required training. For me, it was like a module that I had to do at the start of the PhD. And also, yeah, I've had to send the confirmation report. So this is basically a report of about 5,000 to 10,000 words that details all of my plans for my PhD, goes through the background and the theory behind my research, the questions and the studies that I want to focus on, as well as like my timeline and things like that. And so yeah, basically after they confirmed that everything's kind of submitted paperwork wise, I had to give my presentation. And the presentation basically just is a summary of the confirmation report that I had to submit. I am pretty sure that like only half of my committee would have read the report. I did see the chair with an annotated version. Talking to other PhD students, that doesn't seem to be the norm. So I guess the presentation is a good like accessible way for them to understand what I'm trying to do. So yeah, in terms of what I actually presented, first I went over the key concepts from my PhD. Like the main definitions of things like well-being and mindfulness, as well as some of the key theories that I'm trying to draw from. And yeah, I guess this is mainly for the chair's benefit because they're coming from a completely different field, but it's also good to make sure that everyone's on the same page about what my topic is actually looking at. And for me, a lot of the background information stayed the same from pre-confirmation, so I made sure to just sort of summarize the main concepts rather than going over what I talked about in the pre-confirmation. And then went on to kind of explain what the rationale and the literature gap that I'm trying to focus on, which in my case is that there's been a lot of research in looking at how effective interventions are for well-being, but there hasn't been that much studies looking at how personality impacts on who seeks out these interventions and for whom these interventions are most effective. I don't think I'm going to go into too much detail about what my research is about. But if you're interested, let me know down in the comments below and I might make a video or two about it. And I guess like the purpose of that like first kind of section of my presentation was to contextualize my research and really stress to my committee as to why what I'm doing is important, because I think that's one aspect that they kind of have to evaluate you on to make sure that what you're doing is actually valuable for the field. And yeah, just to make sure that the research questions are derived based on the literature gap and they're guiding and are connected to the studies that I'm planning on doing. And then afterwards, I just went through my 3 studies in detail. This step kind of varies for different people because everyone will be like at different stages of planning their studies or running their studies, depending on the data collection processes and whether the data has been already collected or whether you're part of like a bigger project or you're trying to start up the project from scratch. It's really different for everyone. But yeah, for me, the way I kind of structured the section is by giving a brief description of each study, going into the methods, and then going to the my current progress or where I'm at with that particular study. For one of my studies, I already had the results, so I was able to actually let them know what the results were. And then in my third study, my last study, that one's still kind of up in the air. I haven't given it too much thought about what I'm going to do. So what I did was just go over the different options that I'm considering and some of the things that I have to sort of think about when planning and trying to choose between the different options for the study. And that was really good because then I was able to get some feedback from the committee about what option I should go with and some other things that I might need to consider for either one. So yeah, I guess overall the main thing that they're kind of looking for is for evidence that you have done something over the year, whether it's thoroughly plan and prepare each study or already collect data. Very different for everyone, but I guess they just want to see that you've done like a decent amount of work in a year and that at least you have some concrete idea of what you're going to do. It didn't seem to me that like the committee had marking criteria of anything they're looking for specifically, but this is just based on kind of the feedback that I've gotten, some of the good points that they've said, as well as talking to other people. And then I finished off the presentation just by going over my timeline and laying out what I'm going to be doing in the next year, and then going over some issues that I might encounter with some studies, as well as the budget. I guess one of the things that I feel like the committee tends to look for in these types of meetings is that the student might have thought about the different issues that they might encounter for their studies and ways that they can manage these issues. So for example, for me, a big point that I raised was that my meta-analysis might kind of blow out my timeline because it might be bigger than what I expected, or it might take me longer than I anticipated. And so I kind of tried to show that I had plans in place to sort of reduce the third study of my PhD to something smaller, or like I could even just reanalyze existing data just so that I finish in time and I kind of manage the risk of my meta-analysis becoming like a massive study. So things like that kind of shows the committee that you have plans in place in case things do go wrong. Again, I want to stress that like the exact format of these meetings does change, like it does follow a certain structure, but what you might discuss might be different depending on the kinds of projects that you're running. So for example, some people have particularly resource heavy projects and then they might focus more on trying to work with the budget or how to get resources from different labs in order to run this study. Otherwise, others might be more difficult in terms of like the theory and trying to grasp at that. So I guess the main point of the meeting, like my kind of main collection of that, was just making sure that I can like pass the PhD and finish it, and that I'm not running into any problems, as well as then making sure that I've actually done some work and I haven't like faked being a PhD student for 1 year. I am kind of jumping around a bit, but at the end of the presentation, there were just some questions, like clarifying a few things. There was a few questions about my, I think one of my results and what that could mean and whether I could run an additional analysis on it. There was a question about the relative importance of 2 of my studies, things like that. And I think actually I got quite a few suggestions for things that I can do, particularly for like making sure that I have enough help for meta-analysis methods and also, yeah, some suggestions for how I can plan that third study. So I was quite lucky that my committee didn't really grill me, but they seemed more of trying to help me and give me feedback on what I've done rather than sort of interrogating me on my choices. And then, yeah, after that question portion, I was basically asked to leave the room whilst they discussed, I don't know what they discussed. I'm assuming that they tried to discuss any issues and come up with feedback for me. Not too sure. That was a bit of a scary process because I don't like the idea of people talking behind my back, even though they were like obviously had good intentions. And yeah, basically after 15-20 minutes, I was asked to come back in. They let me know the outcome that I passed and yeah, some feedback. Most of it was quite good. And there was a few suggestions about what I should think about and consider in order to improve the way that I work. And my supervisors then left and I was left with the chair, and he had more of like frank feedback to give me, and basically like that portion of the meeting is basically to raise any issues that you have about the PhD process or your supervisors. And personally for me, that portion was quite short. I didn't really have any issues to raise, and I don't think there were any issues that the committee raised that I should be aware of. So yeah, just reiterated to my chair that I was quite happy where I was at, and he seemed to think the same. But yeah, I guess this kind of opportunity is important for students who are struggling and perhaps feel a bit uncomfortable to raise issues with their supervisors directly. At least they have someone else who's a bit more unbiased and like a third party. They can go to them for help. And yeah, so that was about it. A bit anticlimactic, I know. Apparently, I think I'm meant to get some written feedback, which is just reiterating what they've told me in the meeting. So yeah, I hope that was kind of helpful. I would really appreciate a comment to say whether it was or wasn't helpful, and whether you want to see more or less of these types of videos. If you have anything else that you want to see or any other questions, then let me know down below. And I hope to see you guys next time.